Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch. I know this is the post-lunch session. When we did our prep call with our speakers, I said you need to bring all the energy for this session. So I'm going to ask the same of the audience. I want all the energy from the audience for this one as well. And I hope you saved your best questions so far until this session. So in this first panel session of the afternoon, we're going to come back to AI. It's obviously been a thread running throughout today. But this is all about kind of lessons learnt so far from deploying AI in government. You know, it's the thing that I think lots of governments around the world are looking to AI maybe as being one of the big ways in which they can meet some of those big challenges that they're facing, and it really could be transformative. But there are still issues around how do you deploy it? How do you deploy it safely? How do you deploy it so that all of your staff understand how to do this well? And I think the more that we can learn from things that have already been done, the guidance that is already out there, then the better it will be for everyone going forward. I know I say this every time, but we really do have a stellar panel with us here for this session. So please do make the most of it. And as I say, give them the most difficult questions that we have had from the day so far. I will introduce the panel. I'm going to put a quick question to each of them to kind of set the scene for us, and then I will be throwing it over to you, the audience. So we have with us here on our panel, we've got Yatin Mahandru, who is Head of Public Sector and Health at Cognizant UK and Ireland. And Yatin is going to be talking about some of the research that they have been undertaking with Global Government Forum. So I will come back to that, Yatin, in a moment. We've got Daljit Rahal, who is Chief Digital and Information Officer at HMRC. Laura Gilbert, who is Chief Analyst and Director of Data Science at 10 Downing Street. We've got Danuka Vijayasinghe, who is co-founder and director at WR Logic, and then Phil Rumans, who is Digital Services Manager for West Berkshire Council. So again, great to have not just central government, but people in the wider public sector as well. So Yatin, as I said, I'm going to kick off with you just to kind of set the scene a little bit, because you've undertaken some work on AI across government. I think, is that UK government or beyond UK government? So if you could just tell us a bit about the research and the key findings, that would be great.
Of course. So what we did with Global Government Forum was interview a number of senior civil servants. Kevin Cunnington, the head of GDS, was the individual we worked with. And it was to assess the state of readiness of UK government to implement AI across a broad spectrum. And the report's available. I think there are copies of it here too, if you want to take a look at it. The main things that came across to us were funding, of course, in the current environment, a lack of skills to implement AI, about which we can talk more because I know there are various thoughts around that. The challenge of legacy and data, because sometimes policymakers think AI is a silver bullet and maybe it's a lack of education, but underlying issues to implementing AI are not always addressed. And then the fourth one is safety. As citizens, if people are making decisions about our benefits, our taxation perhaps, criminality and others, you'd want some transparency around how that decision's taken. I think the overlying theme that we got, and someone had a great metaphor, one foot hard on the accelerator and another on the brake, and perhaps is a little bit challenging for an afternoon session, but it was a lack of pace. People felt there was a lot of emphasis on regulation. We had the Bletchley Summit that the PM of the time organized. And were we moving fast enough in government in comparison to the private sector? So in summary, that was what we discussed. It was 10 to 12 civil servants. It included people like Susan Ackland-Hood, Daljit himself, and others. So it was a range of opinions we picked up. But essentially, that was the thrust of the conversation. And we'll use that report at Labour conference next week as well as a discussion topic with some of the policymakers there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Yatin. So as I say, there are copies of the report, I think, outside. If you haven't already picked up one, please go and see if there are any left. But you mentioned there lots of those issues, I think, that have already been themes today. So funding, skills, legacy and data. Obviously, this is all about data, so the data issue is really, really important. But I love the way you said it then. You've got one foot on the accelerator, but one foot on the brake, because I think people are kind of torn.
I can't claim that, and it was Chatham House rules.
Okay,
so
fine.
And I can't remember who said it
Whoever
either.
said it, it's a good quote. Thanks, Yatin. So I think we'll come back to some of those issues. That's a really good way for, I think, kind of framing this conversation. So Daljit, you were obviously part of that research, but I wanted to kind of talk to you then from an HMRC perspective. Can you give us a sense of what's going well from the deployment of AI? Are there any lessons learned that you could kind of share with us, any examples of things that have already been done?
Yeah, I mean, look, firstly, AI has been, we've been practitioners of it for a long time at HMRC. I've got my head of data science in the audience there. We've got a healthy data science community. A lot of the work we've been doing around risking, fraud, etc., and some of the sort of, money laundering analytics, all sorts of things of that type, have always had an element of AI, whether it's straightforward neural networks for sort of, building models or using some other data science capabilities to do, text analysis and a whole host of things. But with the generative AI, we're at the stage of coming out of the experimentation into operationally live. It's a very sort of thin dividing line between that, what we've already got operationally live, and the new things we're going live with. And that has really been based and built around the guidance we got from, I believe, Laura and the team and Cabinet Office on ethics, and our data scientists interpreting that and keeping us on the straight and narrow with that. And we've got 23 use cases. They range from improving our contact center sort of capacity for agents to have the call that they've just been engaged with somebody for half an hour to be summarized and then captured and sort of put into that kind of field in our CRM system, which in the past they would have to type in. So that definitely freeing up their time. All our use cases are in areas where there is no automated decision being made. There's always a human in the loop. And at the other end, we've got some of our legacy code written in old programming languages being translated into the more current programming languages, and as well as other tools in between those two ends. I mean, there's 23 of them. We're about to go operationally live with the first one. When I say about to, in my world, that means in the next 3 to 6 months. But we're all kind of hoping that from there we will get our sort of confidence and go further. But just before I finish, whilst all this is going on, we are also having to take the threat of AI quite seriously. So there's, phishing sites set up to make it look like you're dealing with HMRC, but you're not, through to all sorts of other threats. So we're trying to sort of develop our thinking around how to counter the AI threat itself. And then thirdly, whilst all that's going on, we're working with our partners because, it's just there now, right? So we've got the pilot going on with 1,000, and that's going to increase to a bigger number, as well as we kind of, just use it without thinking about it. We've got, when we do our Teams calls for the hard of hearing, we put this sort of transcription, speech-to-text services on, and we're just working in partnership with our partners and software providers to learn what they're bringing into the product itself, and then working out our ways to kind of utilize it and use it.
Thanks, Daljit. Just very quickly, so you say you've got like the 23 use cases. Have you kind of worked with other departments as you've been doing that? Are you learning with each other, from each other as you do that?
Yes, we are. Those use cases initially were all built around our HMRC business teams and technology teams getting together and looking at opportunities and some of the problems that we wanted to solve, and carefully selecting based on our criteria things like if it improves guidance and how guidance is issued to a citizen in how to fill out their tax form, safe use case.
Right.
Automatically predicting something about them, not a safe one. So having gone through a criteria, that's how we arrived at them.
Yeah.
However, then working with CDDO, the Cabinet Office, and GDS, and David Knott and the team, we've shared all of our ideas with them, and of course we've also waiting for some of the other departments for what they're doing to see if we can sort of collaborate with them or steal from them, and we're happy for any of them to take any of our ideas. So it's very open. We do regular progress updates on this to David Knott, the CTO for sort of centre.
Yeah.
I think there is collaboration. Some of the smaller departments are just asking me for when that works, can I have it? And I'm saying, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, great. And I think we can come back to maybe in the questions the issue of the threats, because I think for all of the opportunities, there's also those threats, potential threats you need to be aware of. Thanks. So, Laura.
Wow.
So Laura Dalgett mentioned there that some of this, he'd been following some of the guidance from the centre. Can you give us a sense of what's going on where you sit, right at the heart of 10 Downing Street? Sort of what's the latest thinking, and are you pleased with the progress that you're seeing in departments?
Sure. So, for context, I joined Downing Street 4 years ago to run the data science team, and then last November was asked to spin up the incubator for AI, which was at that point in Cabinet Office. Sort of 70 people. I'm hiring entirely technical experts, mostly from outside government, to really build AI solutions, ideally really quickly and really well. With the change in government, there was a machinery of government change, and the incubator, along with CDDO, the Central Digital Data Office, and the Government Digital Service, GDS, have all moved to DCIT. So they're no longer at the centre of government, and they are being sort of built out into this new digital centre, where hopefully departments can go to sort of one place for digital and tech solutions. But yes, where I am is not writing guidance. We're very much in the doing it space. And what we really pitched for the incubation and the way that we're running it is to look at, what they're now calling missions, but the high priority areas of government, and see if we can build AI solutions that have real impact sort of quickly and well. So examples might be, we've got a programme in prescriptions. So academics tell us that poor prescription profiles kill up to 22,000 people a year.
Wow.
And cost about £1 billion. About a quarter of that is in just wasted medication when you're giving people too many drugs, and the rest of it is an actual harm to people when they are what they call on polypharmacy type prescriptions, lots of drugs. You get lots of drug interactions, particularly in older people. You might be a little bit susceptible, and we might find people who are on 19 different drugs, and 5 of them all act as a drug thinner and then a blood thinner, and then maybe they collapse and they can come to real harm. So we're using AI. There's an AI pharmacist. We've got it passing the pharmacy exams, and it can go through the patient lists and put a red flag against everybody who looks like they might have a dangerous prescription profile, and it can recommend to the pharmacist different drug profiles that you could use, and maybe even questions to ask the patient to see if they're having symptoms and things to look out for. So we're trialling that, working with the NHS, of course, and we think that's a really good use case. Other things we're looking at, something we built quite early was a system to try and get people from asylum hotels, which of course very expensive, into accommodation that was suitable for their needs. And that's obviously good in terms of saving millions of pounds, about £30 million a year, not huge numbers. But it's also much better for people who might be living in a hotel for 2 years with small children, which is not a good user experience. So building this algorithm that simply integrates with the system, and you can use it to match people to the right place. Interestingly, we can pick up that same algorithm. We're using the same process to try and match businesses to the national grid. So there's a really big backlog in the national grid system. So if you come here and you want to build a wind farm, so you're going to give renewable energy back to the grid, or maybe a data centre, it can take from 5 to 15 years, depending on where you are in the country, to get a connection. So you have wind farms that can't give the energy back because they're not connected, and it's a very complicated system actually. And because it's so complicated, a whole market is built around it. But the very similar algorithm to moving people to the right locations for their family and connecting people to the grid in a slightly more, hopefully, rational way, is the same solution. So what we're doing is we're kind of going across government, identifying solutions in particular technical spaces, triaging and matching, sort of like the grid thing. You've got error catching, which is prescriptions and fraud and things like that. And then we've got customer-facing services. So there's the obvious, large language model interface to websites. And that starts to look really useful when you build one for, say, government regulations, which we're looking at the moment, and you sort of do legal services and things like that, things where it's very curated content. And then there's the process of making government better for humans to engage with. So our sort of a last piece in there is around the human interactions. And we've got a lovely pilot out with Citizen Advice Bureau. It's called Caddy. and it sits next to the advisor. And the advisors are volunteers, and maybe sometimes they're new, and it's quite a difficult job, and they really want to help people, obviously. So people will phone in with a problem to citizens' advice, and the advisor will do their best, and often they're kind of trying to search through their own documentation, or they'll ask a supervisor, I don't know the answer to this, I'm new, what do I do? And they're using Google. So we built an integration with Google Meet, and you can also integrate it with Teams and Slack, and you just say, at Caddy, this person has a problem, could you give me a suggested solution? And it will reply, and it tags the supervisor in, so a supervisor will always just quickly check it, make sure that it's right, and then it goes back to the advisor, and they can ask follow-up questions. And it's been incredibly effective. So there's a 60% increase in successful call resolution from using that system, and the advisors really like it. And what we're doing with this is for all of these, we're coding in the public, we're very transparent, we're calling it radical transparency, we're hoping it catches on. We really don't want people to think that we're off using algorithms to make decisions about people. We're not. We're using algorithms to get the decision to the best person faster. Maybe prioritize it. If someone's in much more need than someone else, we want to move them to the front of the queue. But we're sort of proving we're not making those decisions by putting the code out. You can go and look at the code. You can pick it up yourself. If you want to use Caddy in your organisation, you can go and get it and implement it yourself. So that's the sort of thing we're trying to do. We're staying really clear of the policy space, quite clear of the risk space, because I think that's really well handled in government. But the risks that we don't talk about for when they come to that part are the risk of not doing enough and the risks of not having the right people in place. If you want to not be predated, if you don't want to be at risk, you have to have really good people inside who understand what that looks like and can defend you. Yeah. So that's sort of where we are in the risk space. So that's what we're doing.
We'll probably come back to that idea, because you've kind of got permission to take risks, so we might come back to some of that.
Well, they're very managed, but yeah.
Oh, a quick follow-up question, because we had a great question in one of our earlier sessions where we had a lady from NHS England, and she was saying they'd used AI to make discharge letters more empathetic than those that were written by human physicians.
Yes.
And the question was, are you then using that to train physicians to do it better in the first place? And I just wondered, your thing about prescriptions, are you then feeding back into the system to say, you're getting this wrong and this is why?
So the prescriptions is a little bit tricky. We do want to go earlier in the system. There are integration sort of issues, quite difficult. And there's also behavioural issues with all of these types of process. So the incentives on pharmacists are maybe a little bit different than the incentives on GPs. And GPs' early response has been along the lines of, we've already got 47 pop-ups on our screen. Every time we try and do something, you want to add another one that goes, that's not a good prescription profile. No, thanks, that doesn't sound attractive at all. So there's, and you can understand where they come from. So there's something in this about how you operate with the system, and there might need to be a bigger solution about the kind of system GPs are interacting with, in the first place. So something on that. But I think for me, one of the really attractive things about this work is the idea that you can make government more human with AI. And public services. At the moment, half of our teachers leave before they've been here 4 years because the job is so hard and there's so much paperwork. If you can use AI to, help them a lot with all of the admin they have to do, lesson planning, etc. And they then get to spend the time with the children, and you get a more human, education system, through to kind of when you currently write a letter to DWP, if you handwrite it because you're digitally excluded, it can take 50 weeks for anyone to read it. And they've built an amazing system that will read it, triage it, and if you're in genuine need, you'll get a phone call in a couple of weeks. That makes government more human, not less. Yeah. And I think that's a really great focus for government in AI. Yeah. How do we make your experience with government feel like a personalised service and get you humans where you need them?
Yeah, really nice, thanks. Danuka, so you work, obviously with your organisation, you work with different organisations across the public sector. Does the findings of this research, does that ring home to you? What are you finding in terms of what's going well in the deployment of AI and what could be done better?
Yes, indeed. So when we're talking about our client, I think DFT being one of the very good examples of what we do. I'll set the context first. So DFT, there was an incident actually in 2015, an aviation incident, which actually led to the UK to set up this team of experts to go into different countries and basically assess their aviation security. These assessments comprise, I would say, about 400 questions. And when you think about security, these kind of questions, there's no yes and no answer. If someone asks, okay, how's the scanning or how's the X-ray scanning? Did they do a good job? It's more of a narrative. You have to write, okay, XYZ person, he went through the scanner, he carried his keys and so on. So it's more of a story where you have. So we've been collecting this data since 2015 now. So we're really good at collecting data. That's one good thing about the UK government, you know. We got loads of data, all the data in the world, however, we don't know what to do with it. So it's the exact same story. We got loads of data, and sometimes we actually forget the purpose. Why are we actually collecting this data? What is it for? And this is where this whole solution actually came into place. Now, it was actually, to be honest with you, by luck. Initially DFT was sharing another system with Maritime, and then this solution was commissioned, a data landing zone. You land the data. At this time, we're talking about 2018. No one was thinking about AI. However, for whatever the reason, it was actually done. We designed the whole relational kind of a data structure where we can structurally see where things are quite quickly, quite easily, even though it is unstructured data. Now, during that time, since 2018 until now, the hands change. It's quite normal within the government sector. You know, people come and go. It's absolutely fine. However, one thing, what is important is that someone needs to hand over that baton from one person to another. And this is another kind of common thing we have seen. We build a system, the whole leadership change, and we'll build another system. The whole thing gets forgotten about, and fortunately for DFT, AVSEC, the actual platform which was built in 2018, it's been carried over, it's been built and it was improved and so on, and we got to a point now, within the past year or so, okay, we got all this data, what do we do with it? Now, when we think about an assessment, there's about 4 to 5 assessments every month. We would go to different countries, we'll collect all this information. Now, to review, to QA this each question, 400 questions per assessment, someone needs to sit there, read through every single narrative. Not an easy task to do, so we started this new initiative. Okay, how do we actually improve this? So we built a couple of models, we tried to test it and so on. So now we can actually do the QA process up to 90% accuracy. Out of 400 questions, you just have to look after about 40. So the whole time, if you think about 2 to 3 weeks of assessment duration, because whenever we carry out any of these, this type of assessment, it needs to be shared with the host state. Now, we don't have to wait for 3 weeks, it's about week and a half. It's been done. So this is the kind of the success story. Now, how did we get that? It wasn't like that. The main issue we have seen, we always spin up these data engineering teams. You always go, okay, we got data scientist, data engineer, let's build a platform. But I would say it's more like playing a football game without the football or the goalpost. Everyone's running around trying to pretend, oh yeah, we're doing AI, we're doing data engineering, but no one really knows where we're going with this. We do not have a start or an end. We got the middle bit. So what do we do with this? That's the main thing we have been addressing, and that's why this particular case was a success story. And as I said, it is by luck, but I don't think it should be luck. It's something we should think about. Okay, if you're putting together a data engineering team, we have to think about how do we integrate this into kind of real world? How do you actually output this in a way where the person who's at the very end, the user, they can use this model. If you talk data to someone, they will not understand it. However, if you can integrate it in a feasible way, which can help them, all the QA people, they've been reutilized now to do other tasks at DFT, and they're really happy, and that's what makes us happy. Whenever we speak to them, the job you did is great. We don't have to do all of this. Assessment times have reduced. We can actually look at all the data from 2015 because what we've done is we've done some topic modeling where we can actually, bubble up trends and so on. It made their life easier. So these are the type of things we've done, and it's a real success story, and we're really, really proud about it.
Thanks.
And if you guys will, learn more about it, we'll be talking about it later on as well. There's a separate session for that.
Yeah, so lots of the issues there, I think, that are relevant for other AI projects, and clarity of what you're trying to do and why you're doing it, the start, the middle, the end point of what you're doing, and having that data accessible to people in a way that they can see and use. So I think lots of these are speaking to some of the issues that you found in your research, I think. And then Phil, finally, before we throw it open to the audience, coming to you, I mean, you've heard lots here from the central government perspective. Is there anything from where you sit in kind of the West Berkshire Council? Are the issues similar? Are you using AI already? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned?
Yes, so I also co-chair the Local Government Association's AI Practitioners Network and work for West Berkshire Council. So we don't, the organisation I work for doesn't look after the nation's taxes. We're not at the heart of our government. In fact, we empty bins and fix potholes. That's what we do.
Potholes are very important.
Yes.
Very, very important.
Well, that's actually the public perception, but actually there are around 1,000 services that local government can deliver under the 300 councils across the country. So it's sort of different combinations of those. So leisure centres, libraries, adult social care, obviously a big topic, children's social care, all sorts of services like that. My favourite one is zoo licence. Anyone thinking of opening a zoo? No. If you do, you're going to have to speak to your local council.
Central government sometimes feels like a zoo.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of pets, if that counts.
I don't think, well, unless you need a licence for them. No. So, at a smaller scale, local government can really sort of, at its best, work as an incubator for ideas. And even in the sort of local government is split up into little departments itself. In those departments, they can be incubators for ideas. So I kind of, in my examples, I've sort of split them into generative AI and machine learning. So our first sort of foray into generative AI was, we were still worried about the risks of data, what could we use for that. So we started to use generative AI to write job adverts, because the whole of the data there is going to be in the public domain anyway. So salary, who it reports to, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter if it leaks out, or we used OpenAI, I think it was ChatGPT 3.5 at the time. It didn't matter if GPT used that to train stuff, because it was going to be in the public domain anyway. Yes, so we've been using that for well over a year now. We tested that with recruiting managers before we went live, and they gave it a 7.5, 8 out of 10. I think that's a sort of recurring theme here with lots of this. It'll get you most of the way, but human in the loop is kind of a recurring phrase I'm hearing today. You still need that. It could come up with Americanizations of words, or where it was a specialist, very specialist job, it wouldn't really come up with a very good job advert. We moved on to things like, I mean, it's already been sort of talked about, but where you've got a big policy library. So our adult social care policy library is 100 documents, and they're sort of that thick if you were to ever print them off. And you've got sort of social care practitioners needing to delve into them and find out policies. So we built a sort of a policy assistant based on that. But and you can imagine that there's all sorts of, even in local government, we love policies and things like that. So there's all sorts of opportunities for that. And the last sort of generative AI example I've got that we've used, and we actually I'll talk a little about working across sort of borders in a minute at the end. But we took something that Swindon Council did with Amazon around the translation services. So 2022, this was just in our children's services. So 2022, I think we spent £27,000 on translating documents from one form into another, no personal information, and just sort of information about the council. In 2023, we spent £21.
Wow.
So that's not 21,000, that's £21. Or even for a council, £27,000 to nothing is, I think our revenue budget was 175 million last year. It's not a huge amount, but it's about sort of proving that the thing works before you start exploring it wider, rolling out even across a council and across government. So the the machine learning example I've got that we are doing, and other councils are doing this, and our Hertfordshire Council are doing it, many others are doing it, is as you can imagine, we've got vehicles that travel around the district and just look at the roads, putting a dash cam in those, taking the video from that, giving it to an AI. It'll look at days and days of video footage, and it'll be able to work out the state of the roads. So what that means is we can identify, back to potholes, where potholes might occur even quicker than sending a highways engineer out. But we still need to send people out to look at them, but you can assess the state of the roads. And that's on a small scale, but again, we can scale that up. Lots of different vehicles. We could put dash cams in and sort of analyse that video footage of stuff. And on the sort of ethics and privacy notice, it does sort of obfuscate people's faces. It does obfuscate number plates before it analyses anything. So it runs through that routine before it does anything.
Fab.
Best councils can work as sort of little incubators for stuff. If you're interested in doing something, you may have heard the term cash-strapped council quite a lot in the press. We're always keen to work with other councillors, keen to work with central government, and sort of collaborate on these things. So do get in touch with your council or through me or whoever, if you have connections there. If you have something you want to try out, maybe on a small local level, I'm sure your council will be interested in doing something like that.
Brilliant. So if people have ideas, they should come and talk to you. Fantastic. Okay, we've heard there lots of kind of examples of things that are already being done, and maybe a flavour of some of the challenges, I think, and some of the areas where more could be done, some of the barriers still. Who would like to kick off? Yes, thank you. Right at the back. That's great. Thank you. Going to make our lovely assistant there run up. Thanks.
Great to hear the examples of the products that have come out of the incubator and how you've prioritised building quickly and well, particularly for the new digital centre of government. Having personally witnessed how slow setting up data sharing agreements or shared DPIAs between government departments can be, how have you overcome that with the pace you're trying to achieve in the incubator?
So some of it is we align quite directly to ministerial priorities, which unblocks a lot. We also, the 10 Data Science team has solved a lot of these sorts of problems already by creating a solution called Rapid, which is again on GitHub, Rapid API development, and it's an API system that's a one-line install. And we've sort of rolled that out in 14 departments already, and there's a lot of data that's live on that. I think we've been about 8,000 data feeds in since we started sort of come live into Cabinet Office. So in a lot of cases, they're data feeds that we already have and we've been using for policy modelling. Where it gets a little bit more complicated would be something like the NHS programme. But again, we've got 3 partnerships. So we've got a partnership with Pharmacy to You and then 2 with with health trusts to share data. And the central NHS was very keen on this and therefore sort of greased the wheels a bit to make sure that we could get things agreed quite quickly. But when you've been trying to get data shared in central government for 4 years, you've kind of got a few tricks up your sleeve by that point. So I think, sheer experience. Though I think the one way that the incubator wouldn't have gone well would have been if we'd only hired external experts, not had a few people like me who are already integrated with the system and able to figure out how to get things. I think the other point on there is that the way that we select projects, there's a number of things. One of them is, do ministers care? Are they going to help us, push it? Are they going to put a bit of drive behind it? But we've also got, things like how much public good is it? How much money does it potentially save? Is it reusable? And the key one is it deliverable? So if we hit something where we went, this would be a genius idea, but there's just no way to get the data, we just wouldn't do it. So that there is a degree of selection which does include, if it's a data set we're just not going to be able to get our hands on for 6 months, we're going to go and do something else. The opportunity cost is too high. So I think as you try and roll that out ubiquitously, hopefully by hiring a lot more skilled people and building it into the way we work, where we're digitising more services and we're including smarter algorithms. I sort of don't even really want to use AI because it's more the end-to-end sort of digital solution. We'll run into that more and more, but hopefully we'll have more and more people who can help fix it and more understanding in the system of why it's important and why data sharing isn't a threat but an opportunity a lot of the time, etc. You're right, it's not trivial.
Thanks. I wanted to, Dalja, has data sharing and barriers around that been a an issue? And then Yatin, I want to ask if that was one thing that came out of the research as well.
Well, look, it is always an issue now. It depends very much. We, for example, at HMRC, we've published about 40 APIs. These are as part of Making Tax Digital. These are public. These are not for anyone can sort of subscribe to them. But their primary purpose is to allow software writers to create tax products. But there's that route. It's always been available. And if you look at the .gov.uk API catalogue, the 40 odd from HMRC, there's at least 40 from DWP, and there's a whole. So often people think the data hasn't already been made public, but it has. But then the second thing is we already, as part of what we do, we share, I think we call them about 150 odd legal data shares. But each one of them, to establish each one, does take a bit of time. Every time we get a request from another department to say we need this data, it's not simply a technical problem. We have to go to our legal department, and they have to look at the kind of what are we legally allowed to do. Usually, in 9 out of 10 cases, they will say yes.
Right.
But there's that is really built around the sort of we've only been allowed to use this data for the primary purpose, and therefore we always have to have that legal checking. It takes time.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of the times we've already got that in place.
Yep.
So historically we did it for somebody else. Then it's no longer that much of a problem. What is a big problem, though, is the accountability for that data doesn't end if I've just given it to somebody else. So occasionally we have to look at, if we do give you this data, we can't use a hashing algorithm because if we do, the other departments use a different one, you can't join it up. So what we want to do is to make sure that you've got all the controls in place so that our security officer can say, well, actually, by giving you this data, we feel that you've got mature security controls in place so that we can have that extra check done. Because if it leaks, it doesn't matter which department it leaked from. It's where it came in. So it's that responsibility, that accountability, because we do have probably one of the richest sets of data in out of any of the departments. But it's not true that we don't share it. It just takes time. And we are working, again, with the centre to try and create a more, if you like, cross-government data strategy.
And so, Yatin, before we go to the next question, are these issues that you're hearing kind of spoken about there, are they some of the reasons that were leading to what you said had come out about lack of pace? Are these some of the things that's slowing down the deployment of AI?
So I don't think specifically on data sharing that came across too strongly in the discussions that we had, because I think data sharing has moved on in government from 5 or 6 years ago. About 5 years ago we did work as Cognizant, and I empathise with Laura's comment on doers, we're engineers. We did the data sharing work between HMRC and Food Standards Agency, for example. So things have really moved on, and everybody's got catalogued APIs, NHS, DWP, HMRC. You can go and you can decide how it's going to be done. Yes, the legal burden can sometimes be difficult, but a lot of those sharing agreements are in place now. So that didn't come across as a strong point in terms of lack of pace. I think it was more about, if you look at some of the private sector examples that we've built as Cognizant, virtual AI clinician for the United Arab Emirates, 98% accuracy, 29 AIs, Royal London Insurance Group. It's looking for those coordinated approaches across departments. And of course, the will and the funding to push those through. So it was less about data sharing, at least in the interviews that we did.
Okay. We've got a question there, and then there's Shriti at the front. Thanks.
So, to be honest, I actually was sort of trying to answer the question about data sharing because if there is anybody from HMRC in the room, and there's 2 of us, actually there's quite a few more, we will always be asked about data sharing, but Daljit covered it quite well, so I probably don't have to say anything, beyond the fact that actually there's a lot of data shared. So we have to think about all the projects that the central government already has in place. There's IDS in ONS, which works on this. There's the data marketplace, which is working on it. And there's a commitment from current administration to the National Data Library. So it's kind of, I appreciate the fact how difficult it is to get the data, but Daljit touched on the governance and on our responsibility, the available 150 legal gateways. But actually, there is data if you want to find it. And sometimes we are quite data hungry rather than thinking about how we want to use it. So apologies, this was more of a comment than...
No, that's great. I wanted it to
Thanks,
be
Anna.
a conversation. Shriti, we've got a question here.
Hello, really fantastic panel. I've been very close to the work HMRC is doing and Number 10 is doing, and really very interesting projects. Just wanted to understand from your experience that, doing a lot of projects in AI, has there any been AI maturity model that has been developed? Is something AI playbook? Because in DWP, we have started thinking about the same thing. So yeah, would be very curious to know, is there something that you guys are developing, ready to share, that, the other government departments who really have to get into this journey?
So in case people didn't quite hear the question from Shriti and DWP is, are we at a stage now where we can share kind of a playbook, a toolkit with other departments, given that some of these AI projects now are more mature and have been rolled out for a while? I guess the report might be one of them, but anybody want to say that? Yes, Daljit.
Yeah, I think this is one advantage of not being in the private sector. We're not competing with each other. I think whenever we've been approached with, can we have a look at how you built that model, that algorithm, or that piece of AI, we've been more than happy to share it. If that's what your question was, as long as we know it's been tested and it works, we're happy to collaborate and pass it on.
But from a governance perspective, there must be, I'm going to say there must be, but is there not a group now within government somewhere that brings together people who are,
Not in that sort of formal way. I think groups are doing their own thing. I think that will come out in the wash. But, there's also a piece, so to answer your question, ai.gov.uk/projects, linked to GitHub, there's code. And other people are very welcome to put their code up there as well. There's also a little bit of a piece where, people are using AI as a catch-all. So the first thing that happened when ChatGPT came out is that 6 different people declared themselves the head of AI in government. And, that's the kind of way the system reacts to this kind of big news kind of thing. And, I certainly and others were pushing back quite strongly on that as an idea. And Tom Reed, who was the head of GDS, of course, said, it's like declaring a government head of software. And there's one person in charge of making everybody's got a computer that's got some software on it. It's just such a broad thing. It needs to be a collective responsibility where, as part of our technical skill set, I'm not really that sold on AI adoption as a thing in itself. Mm-hmm. It should be something where we are building better technical and digital services, and very often as part of anything from building a new email system that of course has an AI spam filter and has done for decades, to an integration where you're trying to get people to the right conferences and it has an AI map, a journey planner, etc., through to when we're building new digital services to communicate with the public and thinking about, is there a fuzzy matching algorithm that will get the data together in a more intelligent way? I don't necessarily think what we need is lots and lots of central functions. I think we need a lot of people doing it well and a lot of sharing of ideas. So the sharing of code is crucial, but do we need a central group whose job it is to kind of promote that? I'm not so sure. Sometimes that can be a blocker.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
I'd just like to add, I totally agree with everything Laura said there. And I think this is not big AI is just going to happen because you've got people doing it. This is looking with a fresh pair of eyes, the problems you've been trying to solve when you didn't have it. Mm-hmm. So there's a danger, right? There's a danger you could say, this process is inefficient. I'm now going to put AI on it and it's going to go really fast. But you're not asking yourself, is that process actually needed in this day and age in the first place? So what I'm banking on is to try and do this at an enterprise level with a entire strategy that includes people, architecture. So when we buy new software, we want to make sure we've got things that are not going to block us, whether we choose to use them or not. That's up to us. So it's all kind of doing it holistically, and then hopefully people who are trying to solve problems today will have an option to solve them using AI, and that's how we'll get it a bit more widespread.
I might come back on that one again if that's all right, because you made a very good point there about are we doing the right thing at all. So we've got a piece of work which is looking at government consultations. We do about, as a government, 800-ish consultations a year where you go and ask the public, what do you think about this area of policy? And it's something that we're required to do. So, what do you think about a smoking ban, for example? And for an average consultation, we've defined a new unit of text. The average consultation generates about 400 Brexit withdrawal agreements worth of text. So there you go. So, which is chunky. If you pick up one of those, it's warm. And to analyse that, you have about maybe 25 people for 3-6 months. You've got to read it all and synthesise it into a report. So obviously that really lends itself to a large language model solution. And, we built one up and we're trialling it and so on and so forth. And, so I think it's a really good idea. But part of that process, you do look at it and people say, well, people will be able to kind of fake the responses using AI. Well, of course they can. It's on a website. That'd be really quite easy to do, right? And, how are you going to detect that and so on and so forth? The more you look at it, the more you think, do you know, this just maybe isn't, and I'm not saying I'm right, but maybe this just isn't the right way to get the opinions of the public. I mean, maybe we're building a solution for something when the thing we're engineering is not actually the right answer anyway. So we'll carry on whilst that's the way that government, does it. But I think when you're looking at a lot of pushback and people going, well, you could work around that, you could engineer around that, you could hack that, you could do this, maybe it's because the solution isn't quite the right one, and AI isn't the answer.
So I know Phil and Yatin want to come in on this issue, but Danuka, it strikes me that what Laura was saying, there's a bit what you're already doing.
Exactly, and it's very, very relevant to what we're doing at the moment. I mean, we got all this information. How do you actually make sure that we got actionable insights out of it? And then again, when you think about the solutions themselves, there's loads of things we can do. But how do you narrow it down to the right model? How do you get it exactly right? That is the problem, I think, with regards to DFT, they've been quite, I would say, brave in, coming up with POCs. It could be multiple POCs. We don't have to be months and years of development. It could be a week, 2 weeks. You come up with an idea, see whether actually does that really fix the issue? Does it give me the answer? And if you believe, what we've done actually for the past couple of years or so, we used to build like small models in scale. It takes about a week or so to build, and about 20 of them, small things, and then we try to actually narrow it down to get to the right answer. That actually works really well for us, because rather than investing for a year of building something, but we can quickly kind of get the gist of it. That's
brilliant. Thanks, Danuka. So Phil and then Yatin, we've got 2 minutes left. So this, picking up again on this issue of kind of learning from each other and sharing.
So mine was a sort of question and burning up for that, so I'll be very brief. And I know that the service standard applies to all services built by government, but there's nothing specific about AI in there. So building up on the playbook about how best practice in the service assessments, how is AI being used at all, if you know?
Well, we've developed our sort of set of principles, and they include things like we will never do a fully automated decision using AI. There will always be a human in the loop. When we are looking at new solutions from new partners, we need to know exactly how it's been tested. So we've developed our own sort of criteria that is getting us towards what you're talking about, including how when we have data scientists who've created a model and it works, do we independently have that assessed? Do we have our testing team doing blind tests, etc.? What's that path to going from lab to operational. And then that's challenging us from a perspective, and the playbook needs to include now new roles, if you like, of traditionally, using kind of like segregation of duties, frameworks, etc. They're getting a bit polluted now because of an analyst is allowed to play with real data. A programmer isn't. So you've got data scientists who are programmers and analysts, and therefore we need to kind of create these new type of machine engineering roles and other roles like that, because we're trying to address that question, that playbook. But until it gets there, I think we've got overall guidance and we've localized it for our own purposes.
Thanks. I can see the clock is flashing, so Yatta, we started with you. I'm going to end with you.
So I get 1 minute, which is great, because I won't go deeper than that. I think it's a great point. We don't see at Cognizant or with any of our clients, public sector or private, that AI is the answer to everything. That isn't where we're coming from. We do think that Gen AI is a transformative tool, especially in process. If you pick the right process and process transformation, it can yield great benefits for citizens, for private sector. And that's kind of the essence of the report that we did with Global Government Forum. Where is it applicable, but what's holding it back? And that's kind of the nut of it. But we've never kind of said that's the only answer. It has to be AI for everything. Because it's not going to be, as you said, Laura. It's what is the right solution from our perspective.
Thanks. And we touched on threats. I think that came up, risks and threats. I think we need probably a whole day on that. And
we could probably carry this conversation on for a while.
And how we do with that. Thank you so much. Again, another really, really helpful and interesting conversation. Please give our panel a warm round of applause.
Thank you.